дорогие друзья.
Dear friends, dear participants to this roundtable discussion, it's my pleasure to welcome you. I'm kindly asking speakers to take their place at the platform party, but now we call it a panel. It's a fashion word, but in the Russian, panel has a bad connotation. I do not want to invite my boss to the panel. While my colleagues are taking places, I want to tell you a joke. You know that the savings bank today has taken a mission to provide state services to issue passports. The Sberbank will be issuing Russian passports. And now the advice to Sberbank is to give the passports without pinning loans to these new passports that they will issue to the citizens. And it will also be a part of our discussion today. Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alexander, and I'm the deputy head of the Russian Treasury. And today it's my honor to be the moderator of today's session, and the topic of our session to one issue which is very important to us. It's a Treasury support as the new element of the financial control paradigm. And today we'll be speaking about what is Treasury support all about, what is a new paradigm, and to answer a number of important questions, such as what is Treasury all about? Because this big period of time, over 3 years that we've been working very practically with this instrument, we have more and more issues and models are changing, and the flexibility of this instrument is witnessing that this instrument has a good potential for development. And to be able to think where to move forward now, we have to understand where we are today, and I guess also to discuss those positive and maybe not always positive effects which this tool, the Treasury support, is giving, not only from the interest of the state, but also from the interest of the business. So today's meeting is also very important in terms of getting a feedback, some information from those who are a part of the Treasury support system, and for those who give such support and receive such Treasury support. And I believe that these speakers at our panel today, at the platform party, will help us to understand the topic and also to find some answers to the questions I'm posing. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you the people who are the leading professionals in finances, control, those who have agreed today to work with us and to discuss a number of important questions. Yuri Beresnev, the member of an expert council by the government of the Russian Federation, Oleg Krylov, the deputy head of the Russian Financial Monitoring Agency, Gulnaz Kadyrova, deputy minister for Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation. I'm sorry, I'm a bit worried. The beautiful woman in the panel, I'm getting a little bit anxious. Yeah. Okay, woman in the panel. Again, it has peculiar sexual connotation in Russian. Roman Artuhin, the head of the Treasury of Russia, Tatiana Blinova, the auditor of the audit chamber, Tatiana Sakyan, director of the Department of the Russian Financial Ministry. Well, all women are very beautiful, and that first compliment that I've said, as awkward as it may be, it applies to all who are in the platform party and all who are in the audience today. Tatiana, in fact, is the head of the department which will ensure the normative and methodological support of our work. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Without you, we would not make it, and there would be no topic for discussion. Evgeny Danchikov, head of the main control department of the city of Moscow, and Alexei Sizov, the head of the PricewaterhouseCoopers. And as you can see, the line of our speakers is not random. It has some logic to it. And I also can say that our presentations will also have certain logic, and we'll begin with the law application, and then we'll finish with all the prospects of the legal regulations as presented by the Russian Financial Ministry to make our work better. Dear colleagues, I'm wishing to all of us to have very constructive discussion. What do we have to do for that? We can see that the time limit allotted to us is very limited, only an hour and a half. for this discussion, for our session. 10 minutes have gone already, and since we have such a important and high-class set of speakers, and each of them, of course, can easily talk about an hour and a half and tell us many interesting things about the topic, I, as a moderator, offering you the following format. Number one, we've told you that your speech should be 5 to 6 minutes. After that, I will be forced to take the microphone away from you to lead the process in the right direction. And then, after all the presentations will be delivered, we will be able to ask questions and to hear the answers. Are you okay with that? Okay. Dear Roman, you as the host of the session, I, as the one who is the main authors of this idea of the Treasury support, I would like to give you the right of the first speech. Thank you. Dear colleagues, and a year ago we had attended the very first financial forum in Moscow, and back then our session, when the panel discussion was devoted. Actually, we have some people who used to be with us a year ago. A year ago we had been speaking about the state financial control. We've been speaking about the state financial control at the part of the government management, and we've been saying that one of its assignment is risk management. But the state financial control is not in a vacuum. It should have a certain set of instruments to solve the problems and solve the issues, achieve the goals. One of such tools is Treasury support. The very term, the very notion, the very institution of Treasury has emerged not so long ago. It has gotten a wide use only since 2016, and now very briefly I would like to say what's the main idea and the essence of this tool, of the new tool of the budgetary policy. First of all, this tool applies to the special funding which is provided by the government. It's a special purpose subsidies by the Russian constituent territories and by the legal entities. And the second line of expense, second expense item would be prepayments. Prepayments, which, as we can see, and the accounting chamber is also noting that they are given more and more from the federal budget. As for the content, this instrument looks like that, as many of you are already aware of it. While previously the funds had been deposited to the checking accounts of those who get these advance payments and payments from the federal budget, now they're being wired to the personal accounts opened in the Treasury. And the second mechanism of the Treasury support, all the payments will have the auditor's trace. Each payment will have the act of the works performed according to a contract or agreement. Briefly, this is the idea behind this mechanism. And what have we gotten? What kind of effect we've gotten in this 1.5 or 2 years? If you look at the examples of those projects, such as the building the space launching pad Vostochny, building the stadiums for the World Soccer Championship, and also servicing a number of legal entities and companies, especially special economic zones. Jointly with the accounting chamber, we've done the full inventory of all the resources which have been allocated from the federal budget, and it has been returned 289 billion rubles, which previously had been on the accounts of the receivers of these funds. Out of this amount to the revenue of the federal budget, as the money which are not being used, 12.8 billion rubles have been deposited. It's the very first outcome that we've done this inventory. You can see what kind of assets that had been formed by the previous technology. And now the next thing is basically the free principle. We're giving money for specific needs, while previously the funds had been wired. There is the budget assignments, and the subsidy could be received in the beginning of the year to the accounts. And now, to be able to qualify for these subsidies, the recipient of the subsidy have to provide to the Treasury respective documents which would substantiate the use of the funds. And in this way, slowly, as the funds have been wired, the money are being used, are being drawn from the federal budget. In this way, we have the higher quality of disbursing the budget. We are attempting to get, let's say, 70 or 80% of the funds disbursement, but it's a realistic spending of money based on the needs. And this also entails the possibility of redistributing resources within the existing budgetary mechanisms. And also another effect is that the money, the balances on the accounts of the Russian regions, according to the special subsidies, 242 billion, January 1st, 17 billion only. Within a year, we've been able to change the money. It's a 6 billion rubles. What we also see that thanks to this new mechanism, and basically it's a demotivation of the possibility of using these funds for making money, for other projects within the standard corporate management. We can see the increasing of the speed of this turnover. If the money are in Treasury, you cannot simply put them on the bank deposits. The recipients of this government funds sometimes are trying to use these funds, and they try to make some revenues of it and stuff like that. And these balances on the accounts of the recipients, the first impression is that the state has taken this money from the lending organizations. And there is a feeling that, well, how will these lending organizations will work without this passive monetary base? We're saying that all these remainders will be working for the Russian economy. Yes, they are on the accounts of the Treasury, but Treasury is also one of the very proactive market player, and they offer these finances to our lending organizations. In 2016, we've had the unprecedented revenue of the state government, 82.7 billion rubles. These are the proceeds of the liquidity management, and about 25 billions from this amount have been brought in by the balances of the Treasury support. And we have a discussion today. Is that all that great, all that shiny, and why do we need to do some other things? We have some challenges and some issues that I have to work through and deal with. One apparent thing is convenience or inconvenience for our clients. Let's not pretend, and we have to say frankly that prior to 2016, we have not been working with commercial entities. We had been working with the budget recipients. They know all the rules and procedures, and for the commercial sector, these treasury procedures had become a managerial shock, because it's all the requirements to fill in the paperwork, to submit the paperwork, and all which is submitted to the Treasury you cannot specify, you cannot amend, you cannot change the data. Of course, there is an audit trace, and it requires the recipients of these special purpose grants to give more strict reporting. We understand that as a result of these novelties, money are becoming more expensive for business, and there is also additional administrative burden for providing documents into the Treasury. We're thinking about that, and the main goal is, where are we heading? Why do we need this tool? And as a part of our forum today, much has been mentioned about the factor of trust. You know, one of the elements of trust towards the authorities and the government is the use of the state allocated funds. When you speak about budget expenditures, we have very negative connotation in the Russian society, like I don't know, people are trying to suspect somebody of the misuse of funds. And we have the full measure of trust to the government, to the society, and to all the inspecting bodies. One of such transparency measures are the steps regarding the pricing. The Russian president has issued a decree about the Treasury support dated of 2nd January of 2017. It says, why do we need the Treasury support? In addition to traceability of settlements and accounts, there is another goal that we have to prevent price hike, price increase, unjustified price increase. So the next step that we are experimenting with in 5 projects. This would be the budget monitoring. Elements of the budget monitoring. This would be a separate accounts. It's written in all the normative documents. Some comply with it, some don't. It's their own issue. And secondly, disclosing the pricing structure. We have the tax return form. We can also speak about this expenditure return form. And this instrument basically explains what government is paying for, what's the price structure, what's the rate of return, and this should help business. And I believe that this instrument and our discussion will help us to increase the level of trust towards the whole system of the state budget expenditures. Thank you, Roman. Thanks a lot, and perfect timing. That's great. And also, in addition to that, you have elaborated on the thought which the chair of the government within the plenary session mentioned today, that while discussing different topics, he, among things, have mentioned about the Treasury support measures, and I would like to draw attention to all the present to this slide, which is not only depicting the stage of our development, but it has a motto about the movement, and Roman has mentioned that we are going to move towards budget monitoring. It's not an end in itself, it's moving towards a certain result. And we've been speaking about processes, but we have to give results. Again, one of the presentations of the chair of the government, we have to move away from the punishment towards prevention. I think what we're doing today is actually the answer of this assignment. Yes, Treasury support is a new instrument, although it has certain story in 2015, 16, and 17. There is a future behind this tool, but it's not only for treasuries as such. It is also a tool for our ministries and government agencies, for the state procurement companies and agencies. And I would like to kindly ask Gulnaz, one of the biggest state customers and distributors of the state funding, to share her position and opinion. How do you evaluate this tool? And in your opinion, what we have to pay close attention to so that this flexible instrument become even more useful and more comfortable and less risky and less costly? Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to congratulate you with our professional day, and I would like to thank the moderator for the tone which he set in the very beginning of our communication. Well, we're very happy to oblige and to come over whenever we are asked. Invite us to your corporate parties, if you will. Well, at the end of my presentation, I'll explain what I mean whenever I invite people to celebrate the New Year with us. Yes, our office has a very complex expenditure base and structure. This is true. It's about 173 billion rubles would be subsidies to legal entities in Russia. We have a wide variety of different types of expenditures, about up 80 items and articles. We have some subsidies which are given according to the actual borne costs. There are some other subsidies which are like a prepayment or down payment. Since 2015, we have been involved in Treasury support work. It was related to 2 things. Number one, we're always happy to take any proposals issued by the offers issued by the Federal Treasury. Because if you are a professional, you want to explore things from the very beginning to do the tests and trials and to see how new technologies are working, so that it would be easy for us, for the Treasury, and for the recipients of these funds. Roman, thank you. On a separate note, I think we're successful in this work so far. And the number of items for which we provide the Treasury support, well, in 2015, it was about 73. Then today, every 5th tranche is a subject of the Treasury support. Has it influenced our work? Of course it has. And Roman has pointed out the commercial sector. Are they ready for that? And All the more that on normative and legislative base it was stated that we have to have a separate accounting of all the funds which are coming from the budget to the legal entities. But in practice, it has not always been the case. While all these financial floods, they are now subject to the Treasury support, and we've put them into the channels of the Treasury support, and legal entities are seeing that now you first have to do some actions to open these accounts, and then you have to learn how to use these accounts. It's more labor intensive for the recipient, but it's given a very good positive effect, and the efficiency of the main distributors of the funds is also grown up. We've been working in this system for 3 years, and we're getting experience, and I guess the process is becoming easier. Are there any questions, any practical examples? Yes. Legal entities, when getting funds to their checking accounts, previously it was mixed with all other revenues and accounts. There was no separate accounting, and we've had some cases when, just out of habit, companies and legal entities would go to a treasury with the payments that they've received, and we would identify these money which were spent not according to the purpose for which it was given. And secondly, whenever we're speaking about the cost structures and using these funds, historically, when we finance our R&D expenses were the planned calculations and matter-of-fact calculations. Since the law number 74 is saying that the legal entity which has gone through all the tenders and contracts, it has identified the cost of the work. We've agreed to that. We're paying for the contract. The Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, FAS, has made a reprimand to us. They said, according to Russian law, we cannot study the structure of the cost base of the federal contract. When we were thinking about this new expenses declaration, it helped us to go back to the origins. In what way? Now we see the proper expenses for each rubles. This system has to be further detailed and elaborated. Maybe the system has to be simplified in terms of its administration, but still it is helpful. It helped us to make sure that the funds are spent efficiently and in a proper way. And when we speak about the main supervisors of the subsidies, people say, it's much better. Yes, we have some challenges, but jointly we have to solve these issues. Thank you. Thank you. You promised me to tell me about the New Year celebration. Okay, today we've been given an award for the best financial management, and I want to say that 50% of success belongs to our colleagues from the treasuries, because lately, the last week of the old year, when we have a lot of questions that have to be addressed, identified, we have to go to our colleagues and to work these issues in their places. So we always celebrate the new year together in the offices of our clients. Thank you very much for your kind words and for your very productive work. Our relations can be compared to the relations of a big factory, a factory of payments, and any factory, including ours, has to have the R&D departments, the prototyping, and it's actually the test field where we are testing most complex, even original ideas, and then they become the reality. Thank you very much. I would like these three ladies. There are 3 seats. Would you please take up these seats on the front row? Please don't stand, dear ladies, like in that joke, when the old lady is standing next to a boy in a tram. And the boy is saying, "Granny, why are you standing? My probably feet are hurting." She's saying, "Yeah, when my feet are hurting." And the boy is saying, "Probably when you were young, you were yielding your seats for the other people." She said, "Yes, and this is why your feet are hurting now." The boy is answering. Whatever we do, it always has to be audited, evaluated. It has to have not only a feedback from ourselves, our own evaluations, because they're subjective, but there are certain bodies which give you objective evaluation. On one hand, these are our clients, which are criticizing us, and on the other hand, this would be supervisory and control bodies, and most important body for us, both control, both audit organ. This would be the higher organ of the state control, the audit chamber of the Russian Federation. But you have to learn to work like they work.
It's not a control, it's not a monitoring, it's a good advice. It is some suggestion that you cannot reject. Thank you, Tatiana Viktorovna, for coming. We really have very productive cooperation. We meet pretty often, and in our treasury we have a rule not to move very rapidly, and even each motion is performed after we agree with you. Oh, yeah, you prefer not to move at all. Yeah, to an extent. You see it better, you know better. Well, you know, it also can be pretty dangerous. I'm glad to greet all of you who come here, to greet those who come for today's plenary session. And as well, I'm glad to greet the traditional participants of this event. And it is not for the first time in the year, and it just enhancing the interest to this topic, and the issue is being discussed for a few years already. It is of paramount importance, and my predecessors already paid huge attention to evaluation of the positive issues that will meet the needs of the state when we introduce the treasury support. And of course, we will talk about the aspects that influenced those who became the object of treasury support when it was introduced, and they entered the process, as the whole process was aiming to increasing of the transparency of budget expenditures, as well as we were creating a very important society of financial people who are ready to make the expenditures transparency, to enhance their efficiency, to improve the terms, and to make it possible to pay quicker for their agents. And they really didn't escape our treasury support. If we analyze the behavioral model of business, we'll see that the certain part of business was afraid. They were afraid of this system. Whether it had groundings or not, well, to an extent, it did have certain groundings because the treasury support needs the certain financial management level, and they introduced certain requirement system, and you should fit this system. You are going to the new stage of financial development, of the financial part of your life. You do not just step the next step of the stairs, but you are just covering the whole stair at once. And those who were the first one to enter this system, they really should get the medal. You see, we already got certain statement, but before the session, I communicated to two representatives of commercial structures who voiced their very important issue. One of them said that he answered the question what the treasury support gives, what is the purpose of treasury support. It gives the possibility to be sure that non-purposeful expenditures will not be in place. It is important for business because they kind of shake from themselves this burden and risks. But it is also important for the state as well. And this mutual interest is important, but that it is important that as we talk about taking certain expenditures on business, the state takes these expenditures on itself, and the Treasury and the Treasury support performs an absolutely wonderful function of external audit. And these points minimize the expenditures that appear when you shift to Treasury support and you minimize these expenditures. But for this, certain risks really go down and have also certain social effect. Roman mentioned that we see the shift of the money between all the participants of the project. Social effect is definitely here. We can now influence certain social aspects, as, for example, we can decrease the debts in salaries. And it is an interesting effect, and it is an additional advantage that the whole system can get. But for this, does the Treasury support have enough tools to perform all the tasks that it has? This is one of important issues that we have to discuss. A Treasury support that has only hammer and a nail is not enough. It is not correct. And we understand that the institution that we are creating should influence not only in further control, and we should influence our further planning, how we plan our instruments and tools according to the tools. It is not only about fulfilling the budget, and it is about the influence, how we planned our distribution in 3 years course of time and to whom it will go. But through this, I would also love to draw your attention to one very interesting issue. We were talking about risks and their minimization, and when we were performing the control audit, we analyzed the results and we see the following pictures. We took 3 big companies whom we controlled in the 2016 and the past period of 2017. And we've seen that these companies were not subject of the Treasury support, and the means that they had were not the objects of the Treasury support. We analyzed during this time, and we found 144 breakages of law. They analyzed these problems, and if we analyze these violences, and we try to analyze if it was possible to minimize this risk. And in many times, in most of times, we saw that if the entity had been in the Treasury support, they would have escaped all these violations. And we see that we can increase our volume of work that is already in Treasury's field. Well, I see. We have lots of, you have lots of spare time. You can increase the volume of your obligations. We can find the instruments of influence that will allow not only to see the certain motion, and fixate or vice versa impede certain actions, but the instruments that will allow to go further, and this should start if we want to increase the volume of tools and things that are subject to Treasury support. We should perform big preliminary work and understand who are the subjects of the Treasury support. And I think that the Treasury should perform this work. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting presentation, and for us, being subject of Treasury support, is your evaluation and your advice are very important. We are listening to you, and we will always be listening to you. As we were talking about extending of the perimeter of Treasury support, the discussion will continue on, and I think most important here would be the presentation of Tatiana Sarkan. And in order to inventorize the results of the issues that are already done, the advantage payments, there are certain doubts about purposefulness of advance payments. So this is one of the issues that we can discuss today. It is well known that the worst spies are finance spies. They are very canny. They have their own professional celebration, and they also are our colleagues. You know, the more names are in the name of the service, the more celebrations they can celebrate. As for Treasury support, the understanding of risks, and we understand that it is not only the risk support, it is the total. Whenever you go, you everywhere see that the Treasury support can be everywhere. And we set certain targets, we exchange different calculations, we understand what is the risk level of the people who participate in it. And today we see that we have pretty regulated work within the experiment field, and a huge work is waiting for us. We should understand what we should do further on and what decisions we are making. It is important to understand the position of Rosfin monitoring on the Treasury support, as well as we are interested in the experience of this service. What was your experience in communicating with banks? You know that we are also the subject of the Treasury support in the defense sector, but for the orders of Ministry of Defense. But the algorithm should be similar. They should be very clear for our clients. And that's why I'm moving. You didn't know whom I will give floor to, but I give floor to Lev Krylov, the head of Finance Monitoring Service, the deputy head. I will not repeat issues that were voiced by my colleagues, but I will tell you a few secrets about Russian Finance Intelligence Service. As we will talk about finance monitoring tasks, you know that we are combating the legalization of illegal revenues, and we have very strict measures. And you know that we are not in the FATF list, and we are also following all the world norms on the combating of the legalization of counterfeit revenues. Though the time is not standing on the place, and the FATF experts are not regarding the system from the technical point of view, but it is all about efficiency of the measures taken that in the reduction of money laundering, in the prophylaxis measures. Well, we are closer to the name prophylaxis, preventing, and we are evaluating not only finance and economic spheres, but we are talking about a real economy sector. And for us, the Treasury support is not only the finance control system, but it is also a measure of reducing risks of money laundering and the mechanism on preventive mechanism of economic crimes in state budget and state finance sectors. Mainly, we are not aiming liquidation of the outputs, but mainly we are trying to reduce risks and to exclude risk in future. First of all, today, we are developing our cooperation pretty efficiently, and we think that this joint evaluation of the risks based on different information resources who participate in the united system, their processing methods, and the results of the analysis. And it is also efficient and integrated usage of all the tools that we have. So we should agree on all our activities very seriously. But I would love to pay your attention that we do not start from scratch. In 2014-2015, there was interagency working group in combating illegal financial actions with a stable state control for realization of big infrastructural projects and inter-institution cooperation with Rosfinanzor being a liaison officer. And it is used in realization of budget monitoring. We also have the experience of the state order for the Minister of Defense. And these 2 years positive experience today is really necessary in Treasury support. As for state order in the defense sector, the control measures allowed to exclude the expenditures for highly risk, such as offshores, payments for physical entities, the acquirement of unstable securities. The SHIM or shadow companies number decreased. Very few so-called black companies want to be included in this cooperation, and they are controlled by state bodies and the banks. As for the total evaluation, in the past 2 years, we managed to prevent illegal usage of budgetary funds for the total amount of 6 billion rubles, and the total money returned was more than 400 billion rubles. And with the help of credit organization, we managed to prevent 3 billion rubles outflow. It can be seen as a prevention of the economic crimes and as improving of financial and economic discipline of all the participators, of all the stakeholders. And it is very good tool to decrease corruption risks. We can also talk about the decreasing of risk of money laundering. The Treasury support is not a separate mechanism. It is well integrated in all the main trends of public sector. We can create united treasuries. We can see that there are certain compliance services in public sector. The usage of all these tools in state sector is also very important. We've many times repeated today the question of what the Treasury support gives to banks. Of course, these are preventive measures, and it is very clear for beneficiaries, and it is clear control for budget expenditures, clear state orders, and clear and state business possibilities. It is also prevention of illegal competitiveness and the improvement of investment climate as well. Well, you managed a very important issue, and it was voiced in many presentations why the existing set of tools is not enough, because we think that our client is the state and all the others act legally. But if there are certain problems, we can see certain hot points. It is important for us that the supplier is honorable, and we should check the price. If we talk about the state defense order, we can analyze the price. We should have the same possibility in Treasury support. We should understand what is the structure of certain good or certain service. And in this point, we pretty often have meetings with our clients, and sometimes we see that sometimes when we perform certain transactions, the treasurer does not like certain documents, or they want certain additional documents, or they're not satisfied with certain documents. But the model is being created at the moment. But there are two ways of price control. We can have extensive measure or intensive. We can use the scientific reports, and we know there are lots of informational resources, and we can use a comparative analysis and see if the good suggested is higher in market price or lower in market price. And today, we should not replicate the existing experience in banking sector, but we should think what we can do. Probably we shouldn't use sledge and hammer always, but we can use scalpel or knife. You just pay taxes and live peacefully. Today, in the plenary session, there was a very interesting presentation of mayor of our nice city, and it was very interesting. A dialogue between Mr. Silvanov and Mr. Sobyanin. And this huge experience of control in Moscow, efficient control, risk-oriented control, and they also can share the experience with us. So please share your experience with us. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for this wonderful moderator. The moderator is just perfect, and my best congratulations on the Financials Day. I see so many people who have worked and who are working now in the Ministry of Finance. And there are so many people from the Ministry of Finance, and it is increasing and increasing. And the people are working in different spheres and regions and corporations. And probably it is one of the elements that make it the whole system clear and efficient. But I would love to continue the trend that was set by Alexander Demidov, and to talk about issues that we consider efficient and effective, where we should move. And we consider this tool of Treasury support is the exact instrument of future that will create future control system, and it creates the whole sphere of the financial and monetary system. And you see that digitalization is on the cutting edge, and we will soon see very soon this total process. And I can tell you that what we are doing in Moscow is following. As soon as the instrument appeared, we implemented it. All the executives in Moscow are on the Treasury implementation. They have no big choice. And also, we try to use this instrument as widely as possible because we consider it very efficiently. The utility fund, the capital reconstruction, and social responsibility and huge risks are linked to it. And the citizens should be protected. The renovation fund is a very big and large-scale work, and big work has started in Moscow, and it will be going through the Treasury and all the other very serious issues that are being realized in Moscow, and all of them are subject to the Treasury support. So today we see them as most important and efficient. But I would love to look at this instrument from the other side. Let's look from the auditor's side to this instrument. This is most important instrument that enhances the efficiency of our control work. Because if we use this instrument and if we implement it, informational technologies in the systems and platforms that are being created today, we get absolutely new possibilities to perform our control activities. We should not dig into papers. We should not walk on feet to our control object. And if it is a construction contract, you can imagine that we have such a pile of papers that we can spend a year digging through. So we have an absolutely different control object, and it is an absolutely different activities. Actually, you are implementing new mechanisms, and you absolutely change your attitude to your control activities. And the tools that exist today and that are in plan to be developed, as we discussed it today, smart contracts, electronic information about all the acts and contracts, creating of the information system that allows to work on the united platform and plan all our work, and performing the procedure of certain digital platforms and certain united fields. If we manage to link all these things, we create absolutely modern control environment and finance management system that will enhance efficiency and transparency in our activities and to reach all our goals. And we, of course, need people. We need human resources with absolutely different attitude, with different paradigm. We need analytics, those who manage risks, who can map the risks, who can evaluate the risks, to evaluate the importance of these risks, to neglect the risks, and to create the whole system that are aiming into the prevention the problems.
And this is why, as of now, this tool which we see and that the Federal Treasury has already done something, and we've been staying in close touch with our colleagues and also about a system about building the seamless integration systems to make the systems automatic. It's the placement of procedures, implementation of procedures. This all will enable us to, in a very efficient manner, to become a digital state that the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, has been speaking about. So once again, I would like to thank our colleagues, Roman and others, and to congratulate you with a great day of the financier, the day of the finance worker. What I wanted to say, it's a big honor for us to be here with you, to be a part of this panel discussion. Not in the part, we have the Evgeny Menshov, the head of the Treasury Department of the Department of Finances, and all these preliminary control issues and providing information for the risk management. They are largely connected to what you've been speaking. It's the result of coordination of several departments in one megapolis, which is the city of Moscow. In a large sense, it was a very valuable idea that we need to consider Treasury support through the prisms of the state control, and this is the topic of this panel discussion. We're not building something new, and the state financial control in today's paradigm is about managing results. It's not a punishment tool, but it's a management tool so that we could achieve our goal and get a result. And in this sense, we and the minister himself and other officers do that. This event, which is taking place in the last year, administrative reform and handing over the powers of the state financial control to the state treasury, actually resulted in quite a strong synergy effect. And basically, the treasury support has a model, although it's a separate conversation and the topic, but there is a model when we're making payment only after there is a control of the supply of merchandise or provision of services, right at the location of supply, right at the location of providing the services. And only once we know for sure that the service has been delivered in quality, in quantity, or the merchandise have been shipped, only then the payment is rendered. When we have the all the documents, when we organize the control measures, we know what to pay attention to, because the controllers, they also always know how to get just the right information that they need from the massive chunk of information. And having such professionals who have knowledge of how to do all the measurements, all the weigh-in, I think it's a good opportunity to optimize what we are doing on one hand, but on the other hand to make it more efficient, because we are minimizing risk from a client, from our counterparties. Dear colleagues, we are right on schedule. Thank you to all the presenters for being very brief and to the point. And now we've listened to the statement and stances of the government officials. But we'll finish with a presentation from yet another official, but it's important for us to hear out those people who are part of the analytical procedures of the Russian government, those people who are dealing with claims, with letters, with these big layers of data which are sent to the government of the Russian Federation. We're invited to this place on different issues and questions. We're very constructive relations with the expert committee by the Russian government, and Yuri Belesnyov is in fact our standing member. He's inviting us to come over. We are meeting in his place. We know that Yuri is really knowledgeable about the subject, and this is why we've invited you to take part in our discussion. And we're kindly asking you to take the microphone and to bring us up to date on what you think about this matter. Thank you. Mr. Moderator, dear colleagues, good afternoon. Yes, I indeed represent the expert committee by the government of the Russian Federation. We are not business advocates. We are not business representatives. We are more like an expert community which was engaged by the Russian government since 2012 to give external appraisal and evaluation which would be independent for the Russian government regarding certain matters. And in part, this task force that I'm working with, they are heavily involved in the issues of corporate development when it comes to the state-run companies, with the public-owned companies, and as a part of this work with these companies' strategies. It's list 91-R, long-term development program. On one hand, we've studied very thoroughly the realistic situation and the economical indicators of these state-owned corporations, but on the other hand, we can also see, as if from the outside, what problems are arising in these companies. But we are not looking like a controller. We provide this second opinion. It may be more reserved and distant, but still it's is demanded by the government of Russia because it's an external view. It's not somebody from a State Department. It's not some inspectors from a state organization, but our professionals are having more balanced approach when looking at different problems. What I'm just about to say is not an idea of people who have been victims from the companies which had been affected or forced to live in a new, harsher reality. It is not crying on somebody's shoulder, no way. It's more or less with, of course, a certain share of subjectivity, but it's more or less objective evaluation of the environment that we've seen when working with companies, with their quarterly reports, when they are implementing their long-term development programs, when they have the data, KPIs, industry-specific KPIs, etc. And we're doing this work not only on the level of the expert committee itself, but also staying in close touch with the industries, with the Ministry of Industry and Trade, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Energy, Telecom Ministry of Russia, and we are staying in close touch with our colleagues from other ministries and agencies, which for quite a long time have been perceiving and treating these joint efforts as a possibility to find bottlenecks and to eliminating these bottlenecks. If I go back to the main topic of our today's conversation, the tone was set very right, very clearly. He simply explained to us how it has all originated and why we have what we have today, and what's the status with the Treasury support. I would like to compliment him with something else, with even simpler words. State as the owner wants to understand to who it gives the money for certain assignments and how these money are being disbursed, and they need a tool to be sure that these money are spent appropriately and done so in an efficient way. And the Treasury support is one of the instruments of following on these tasks which the business owners are setting for themselves. Whether the Treasury support is doing its work, yes, I would say yes, to a large extent. And in our expert community, at least on the level of expert committee, we have the single-minded opinion that this tool has established itself, even in this limited number of years. The result is obvious. The numbers have been articulated today, and it's the result of our work. Do we have any drawbacks and minuses in this work? Of course, and we've been frank about that and open about that. And colleagues, I would shift the focus when we're speaking about costs. You know, speaking of the current operational expenses, it is becoming ever more complex for companies to work with treasuries. It requires more skilled workers. It requires implementing more complex and difficult technologies. Let's say these are operational expenses, which are time constrained and limited. How much time do you need? Maybe several months, maybe a year. And a company will learn how to work with that, how to live with that, and these expenses will diminish. If, however, companies' costs, and first of all, speaking about public companies that we're working with primarily, if they have different types of expenses, do they have them? Yes, of course. These types of expenses can be split in two parts. Number one, it's inappropriate funds expenditures, and I would like to draw your attention that this inappropriate fund expenditures is not always about the malicious intent to steal this money. Also, we have these stealing cases, the fraud cases, we have them plenty. But more often, and when analyzing a company's particular situation, we see that sometimes companies misuse the funds because they didn't have enough of the working capital. They need to turn over capital right now, and they would tap into the state deep pocket to turn the money around and get cash. Sometimes they needed to prepay certain works for the state defense contract. Not always, they didn't always have their own money. It was easier for them to get into the state's pocket instead of taking commercial credit in a commercial bank, which would be way more expensive. I am not trying to justify them. I'm simply trying to say that this inappropriate and wrongful, absolutely wrongful use of the state funds was resulted because companies didn't know how to or could not at that specific moment to manage their economies and their finances in an efficient way. And in this sense, implementing the mechanism of the Treasury support has brought a very positive impulse in the work of public companies in Russia, not only for the reasons which have been mentioned above, but also because implementation of such a strict control and cutting short any possibility of misusing state funds, even with good intentions, enables companies or make companies to learn and to develop towards more efficient and more correct operation of their resources and their finances. To speak it differently, we're saying that Russian economy is oil addicted, and many public companies, whenever they've had such an opportunity to inappropriately use state funds, they had this needle, so to speak, like a drug addict is using, the needle of the state funding. And now that these funds are under very stringent control, very efficient control, is making these public companies to learn and to find and to apply such methods in their activities, which would be legal, efficient, and without any hint to inappropriate state fund usage. And I think this long-term result, as a strategic result, is one of the key factors, because if somebody somewhere inappropriately used the funds and he or she were controlled, it's a one-off event. But when you create conditions for the companies to work right with their economy, work according to the market conditions, and instead of just tapping into state funds because nobody was supervising them or controlling them, we want to replace this irresponsible attitude, and we're seeing now it's really working. And this is why we would like to thank the Federal Treasury of Russia, which in a very limited period of time were able to give this impetus to the market. You can tell just by looking at the measurable financial results of the big concerns which we have seen on a quarterly basis. Yes, people complain, people shout, people cry, but then quarter after quarter they know it's not a one-off, it's a long-standing, long-term policies, and they're trying to look for way out of these predicaments and situations. And the second thing I would like to highlight now and to draw your attention to, again, very, very briefly, the Treasury support, as it was said before, that the state as the owner wants to control the efficiency of the usage of those funds which they allocate to their contractors and other companies. But there is exactly the same task exist within big state companies regarding their subsidiaries. If you'll take the blue chips, I'm not even speaking about the Rostec, which is about 900 legal entities affiliated to that, but OSK company or Almas Ante and the whole number of others. There are dozens. They have dozens of subsidiaries and affiliated societies, and this big massive to be able to control whether they appropriately use the funds and to control their financial discipline is very difficult. This is why the government has launched two initiatives. First, the Treasury support for the budget funds, and the director for building the single treasuries within the companies. And these in-house treasuries, you don't have to reinvent the wheel because many things have been invented even before us. There are some best practices exist in the market. A very interesting presentation, but you really have to wrap up. We're limited for time. I'm sorry. And in this sense, the Federal Treasury is that flagship which is coming up with methodology and developing methodology, which it should be extrapolated and applied to the work of these in-house treasuries within the public companies. This second task is also very important. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Very interesting indeed. As an expert, you make it very interesting. But I absolutely have to emphasize that this interpretation of yours for Treasury support, that on one hand, it's a good way out for the state corporations as a measure of state support, and we know that we as experts, you do realize the positive effect, and will be using it. We'll be using it, especially for the defense procurements, and when the state implements its Treasury supports, they're implementing their right as an owner. It's for us also very important to listen it from the external environment instead of trying to be creative and to come up with the things on our own. Thanks once again for speaking. You and Oleg has been speaking prior to you that the Treasury support, which is provided by the federal treasuries, and Tatiana, I guess, will mention about what will happen after the new budget code will come into effect in the nearest future. Speaking of requirements of building the corporate treasuries, in-house treasuries, it does exist. And I remember in due time we've been quite proactively involved jointly with the Ministry of Finances in holding meetings with societies and organizations which are subject to create their own treasuries would get stats. And this work is ongoing today, but right where these institutions have already been established, they testify to the fact that the financial management, compliance in companies have become more clear. Less people are ending up behind bars and fined and things like that. And we've invited to this session representatives of the corporate treasuries. Alexei Sizov, he is the rep from the PricewaterhouseCoopers company. Alexei, do we give right evaluations? Because on one hand, we've been speaking about interests of the state. We've helped to get all the basics, but you are addicted to other things. We know what you're addicted to. Using this analogy of a drug addict, and how does your treasury helps you to get rid of this addiction? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Thanks for inviting me here. Well, frankly, there was quite an anxiety for me to pick up the phone and say, hello, we are from the Federal Treasury and we're calling you. It was a little bit tense. I didn't know what to expect when I got this phone call. And me and my colleagues are following these newest trends and newest tools which are available for the market to manage liquidity, because the Treasury support to us is basically quite efficient and effective instruments to manage liquidity and to decrease credit risks across the company. As Tatiana has already pointed out, this Federal Treasury is acting as an auditor of sorts, and we also believe that the Federal Treasury has assumed the role of corporate treasurer. This is what corporate treasurers are doing on a daily basis in companies. Basically, they ensure efficient liquidity management. But we also have to say here that this tool of treasurer support, or let's say working in a company as a corporate treasurer, it's just one of the ways to practice efficient cash management. Just okay, I'll put it this way. Almost all functions in a company are participating in liquidity management. And this is why there are things which are not affected by the Treasury support. And I would like to point them out because the government, as one of the biggest investors, and in our country it is the biggest investor, they have the full right to use their own money, the money of the taxpayers, in an efficient manner, and to expect from those who spend this money also very frugal attitude and very efficient liquidity management in their operational activities. Let me give you 3 examples of where it is possible. I'm sorry. I mean, we're going to just quote you. PricewaterhouseCoopers believes that the Russian Treasury, while providing Treasury support, they function very closely as the corporate treasurers, and as an owner, they make their own decisions about management of their property. We have to write this as a quote, and then we put you in parentheses as the other of this. Again, I'm going back to my 3 examples. Number 1 is management of covered currency risks. What I mean is that within investment projects, let's say equipment is bought or certain materials are bought outside of Russia. They're foreign-made materials and there is a foreign currency component. Oftentimes, companies are looking for a way to go away from currency risks by signing contracts within the land, for buying equipment, for buying components in Russia. But at the same time, company is not free from such risk because it's a long-standing project. The forex market is very volatile, and it so may happen that a contractor company with which you've entered into agreement simply cannot supply what they've promised to supply for a specified amount of money. We are not spending more money. We're saying, yes, we'll not pay you more than has been specified by the contract, and the result will not be achieved. On the other hand, in this case, the company could manage these risks more efficiently. But it's not always the case, because not everyone is at this level of sophistication. And the second example is building our own counterparties and suppliers. We are quite a big corporations. We're managing huge financial flows, and oftentimes companies treat their suppliers by squeezing their supplies dry, and by setting up very stringent payment terms. And not each and every company, even a strong company, even a young company or efficient company, can comply to these requirements. And even though on the market we have very good financial instruments such as supply chain financing, it is not available across the market yet, unfortunately. And we could develop this the whole constellation of suppliers and the business due to the energy and assets of big corporations and state financing. We could build it as a multiplier. And the third example is management of money and liquidity in time, or for a certain period of time. Any treasurer will tell you it is not important how much you spend, but also when you spend this money. This is why you can buy 10 tons of bricks in the beginning of the project, and they will simply be lying on the ground idle, or you can get it in shipments. By buying big number of equipment or resources, you're freezing up, you're tying up your money, which could be otherwise as liquidity on your accounts, yielding you the result. Again, we are not spending additional money, but we are not getting the additional revenue we could have gotten. And summing up my presentation, I can say that from our point of view, the Federal Treasury is definitely a very promising beginning, and I can only hope that the Russian government would have the system of checks and balances and some not only stick but also carrots in this policy for those companies who are transparent and those which are built efficient cash management, cash and project management. Thank you. Quite a good summing up presentation indeed. And one of the goals of our today's discussion is what has to be done so that the Treasury support would keep the balance of our interest at the reps of the state and also businesses who are working for these states. So the whole thing should be transparent. In the beginning of any biddings and tenders and procurements, we have to all understand what will be costs. We have to calculate this cost, and if we can see that these are good faith suppliers, those with good intentions. I think these kind of tough instruments are not needed. But to make an order, you probably have to go through this evolutionary example. You've given some examples. Let's say our clients are facing currency risks and warehouse inventory oversupply risks and many things that you've mentioned. And I can draw parallels from your thing. But everything we do is within legal framework. We understand that the legal framework is always reflective of current challenges, is trying to address challenges. And the Treasury support is developing, evolving. It has been like in 2015, there was the legal regulations. In 2016, we generated the term Treasury support. In 2017, this new coin term has been working quite actively in the external environment. And I believe that after today's session, our colleagues and clients will have a better understanding of what we're doing. But now I can see that the process of improving the regulatory and normative framework, it will never end. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have to understand it. New challenges, digital economy, and of course we have to move into the digital. We have to use all the opportunities. Why are we requiring our clients to bring in the contracts on paper if it's available in electronic format? And switching from paper to e-document rotations, we have to integrate it, we have to use information without laying additional burdens on business with things like printing, typing, assuring and stuff. And if we work with e-document workflow, we'll be able to get rid of many excessive work. It's our goal. To eliminate any redundancies, but to achieve this goal, we have to build very good regulations and standards for our work. And again, to sum up these interim results, I'm saying that I am the person who would like to give the floor to Tatiana, the person who is in love with Treasury support. Thank you. I love not only Treasury support, I love treasurers as well. So do I. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We're not only treasurers. I believe that people from the Russian regions are here, and I hope that our financiers from the federal authority agencies are here. Congratulations on our professional holidays, and I believe that we're standing next to those who have been in the Ministry of Finance a couple of years ago, and I believe that we will be worthy of the cause, worthy of your initiatives and beginnings. I believe we're making history right now. Now, going back to the topic of our discussion, I can say that as a person who has been working extensively with methodological legal documents, I understand very well that any legal regulation, it's the never-ending flood of problems. That any problems, which is usually a shock, and usually you say no to a problem because it irritates me, it changes the balance, it disrupts your life. Now, throughout our discussion, we've been speaking about balance very often. Without the prior agreement, everybody's speaking about looking for a balance, and I think that this motto, this phrase, balance of interest, is worthy of our attention. It's a balance between the taxpayers and the states, balance between the business and the state, between the social interest and the development of the state, because it's about economy and the social development. It's a balance of services, of those who are providing the services, like monopolies, as we've had our discussion. In state procurements, I think the state companies have to make room for the private companies. It also boils down to balance of interest. And now our minister, Anton Siluanov, is giving a very good example. He was saying that they want all the projects to get good finances. And then we get a big chunk of money, and the Ministry of Finance is cutting it short, and which they think is preliminary. It's about balance. I'm going back to this term of balance. And I think anybody who is doing reforms or implementing projects, if you'll find how to maintain and how to preserve this balance of interest, to find this golden middle, I believe it is when we will have a success. When it comes to legal regulation, normative regulations of the Treasury support, yes, we do have a roadmap, and we are working under the supervision of the presidential administration and the Russian government, and this roadmap is for many years. We're making it a reality according to the time frame identified by the government. Now, the main thing for us, like Alexandra has said, we have to make one uniform rules. And the biggest amendments are the amendments to the tax code of the Russian Federation. We've introduced this bill. It has 3 small articles: the Treasury support, general basis, Treasury support for the funds allocated by the state, and the support of the local, regional and local budgets. What used to be the monopoly of the federal treasury for the funds issued from the federal budget, now the same rules will apply in a uniform way. This will be the Treasury support in a standardized way, in the standardized code of rules. Then the amendments to the law number 44, which identifies the biggest class of funds. This would be the state procurement and state contracts. We have a lack of transparency, and we need to give these forms of procurements more structure. And we also have the article for the state procurements.
So the 44 law, it is the condition for 2 sides. It is a contract condition. So so in the law it is written what everybody should know and what everybody should do when they are in this treasury support. We are also planning to introduce new amendments to 75 law, where we have special accounts. As our colleague mentioned, we have the huge block of state orders, in defense sector as well, for treasury support. And as long as we do not have these big laws, it is important not only to write a normative act, but also to understand when we should introduce it. We should make the legal basis for it. We should make the special environment. So we are waiting for these laws in 2019. So for 2018, we will have 2 articles in federal law and federal budget, situations describing the treasury support and other rules, and the measures that are under the treasury support. So if it is not an exclusion, everything is in subject for the treasury support. And the special article is the state defense order. And as soon as we are ready, we will introduce this law and this legislation basis. But whatever we talk about, all our documents, all our efforts, control, the federal treasurer, the finance ministry that is regulating this issue, we need to create the legislation acts that will not contradict other federal laws, but they will be a logical part of all the other laws. Thus, we will be able to create the chain of the control. Well, of course, we love to control even where we do not need the real control. But if it should be preventive control, it would be prophylactic control. Well, everybody use their own words, but we want to prevent and we want to help not to violate the law. So if we manage all these difficulties, if we overcome all these difficulties, we understand it, but it is very difficult to realize. So with Treasury, with all our colleagues, we will be doing our best. And I wish all of you that all our legislation acts on the Treasury support and other documents, I wish all of you that they are clear and understandable. And I wish luck all of you.
Спасибо большое, Татьяна.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all the speakers. I think I was talking most of all because everybody was sticking to time, and we started 5 minutes late, and so that's all the speakers. We have possibility to listen to all the speakers. There were questions and comments, and we still have 5 to 10 minutes. We have two main tasks. The first task is, if there is something that is not clear, we can ask few questions. And the other point, we need to conclude probably few theses. And Roman wanted to greet all the participants. And we have only 10 minutes. So 2 questions, dear colleagues. Please, microphone. Microphone. We are cooperating very efficiently. It is not a question. I would to mention that in our corporation, we have the introduced system of the special administration of target money. And the main question is, what were the main challenges that you faced when you were introducing the as the number of clients is extending? Are you ready for this? You see, we do not talk about problems anymore. We talk about challenges. And the point is that what we are talking about now, if we were talking about it 3 to 4 years ago, it would be kind of budgetary heresy, because the budget system wasn't constructed to perform the functions that we are discussing today. That's why the challenge is logical. It is very rapid, and we should adopt to it. We are adopting to the whole situation, and it's a total new environment we are working in now. And if it is a challenge, it is also a possibility. And for us, it is of paramount importance not to be an instrument that impedes the developing. As it was mentioned by Mr. Greff, for example, if it is development of the bank sector, we were not talking that the state, the Treasury support should not cover all the state funds. And we are trying to implement the integrated approach with corporate treasures, and that is shaping the risk map, what form, what resources should be suggested. And probably even, as it was mentioned by Mr. Graff, we see that banks are facing the change of paradigm of their developing. And the change of the monetary flows going through banks will answer the question, where are the boundaries of Treasury support? And if we talk about the difficulties, we're trying to find the best parameters for our monetary and treasury system, because we want to be necessary and efficient, but we do not want to substitute corporate tools of own finance measurement. Yeah, I think this question covered all the possible questions, and the answer covered all the possible answers. That's why I suggest to wrap up the discussion. Yeah, you said everything. We were talking about it for an hour and a half. So let me state few thoughts that I've heard from you. The general thoughts that I think we should take it here. We should keep it here. So we need to make the treasury support a part of control, and it should be developed. We should go further on, and of course we should monitor. Our purpose model will answer all the models. It will be kind of budget monitoring. It will be a serious shift. Well, we know the structure of price, we know the expenditures, and then we will be able to be good managers. It is a long-term project. I'm even afraid to suggest it because the whole paradigm of state and business relationship changes. It is the change of the business mentality and the changing their policies. There we've heard today different examples. In talking to other corporations, we know that the private sectors was always tackling this issue, but the reports are very, very positive. And probably we should have the expenditures declaration, and thus we will aim our target, and that's why we should shape our next steps, and thus we will be regulating the margins, the return of investments, and so on of the state projects. If we talk about balance of interest, it should be the first purpose, because whatever we are doing here, we should be based on the preserving of the interests of state and business. And one more point, we talked about the situation that extensive developing is not pretty correct. The second plenary session was developed to digitalization, and it is one of trends of our further developing. It is digital treasury support and digital budget monitor. And why it is digital? Because lots of information that is necessary is in data system, in treasury, in federal treasury. And if we continue it, and if we make good integration of our information resources, we will be able to perform it. Am I correct? Do you agree with me? So we will have a release of today's roundtable, and we will state all these positions as we are unanimous about them. The roundtable is nearly wrapped up. We have the last and the most pleasant part of it. We are very thankful for this big amount of people here. I was nearly to check if you are sitting on your places But I know that there was somebody taking money for the entrance. It's great that people are interested in our topic. I even know that there are people from Treasury who were made come here. So, thank you so much for our speakers. And you wanted to express our gratitude, right? Please give him the microphone. And please, diplomas, who will announce? Distinguished colleagues. It is a good tradition now in our forum to award the diplomas for the best financists. And it is huge pleasure for me to award this award to the winner in nominee young professionals for our colleague who is resolving very complicated issues. She overcome the previous stage of the developing inside the Treasury, and she provided very serious internal reform with outsourcing of all the internal functions and she shifted all these functions to a federal body. And this person, I think that in next session of Treasury, we will also demonstrate their future image. And one of our key functions is centralized accounting. And we have here our chief accountant, the chief accountant of the Russian Federation, who should also resolve one issue. We have 1.6 trillion violences, and most of them are accounting violences. So 600 accountant violences. It is Nadezhda Golikova. No microphone.
Нет, не да, пожалуйста. Мне дано было право записать на бланке московской.
Unfortunately, the speaker does not talk to the microphone.
И давайте общую фотографию сделаем в знак.
Let's have a picture. Congratulations on successful session.
Потом к нам.